mental health and what that looks like, and all things wonderful, we hope, right? So what does children's mental health mean? The CDC classifies children's mental health as being mentally healthy during childhood, means reaching developmental and emotional milestones, and learning healthy social skills and how to cope when there are problems. Mentally healthy children have a positive quality of life and can function well at home, in school, and in their communities. So in simple terms, what does this mean? In simple terms, mental health is an important part of a child's overall health and well-being. Mental health includes children's mental, emotional, and behavioral well-being. It affects how children think and feel and act. It also plays a role in how children handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Okay. So what are the mental health disorders among children that children suffer with? So those are serious changes in the way children typically learn, behave, or handle their emotions, causing distress and problems getting through a normal day. Among the more common mental health disorders that can be diagnosed in childhood are what we would call ADHD, anxiety, and behavior disorders. So some of you may be asking, okay, Danielle, so what does that look like? And how do I know if my kid or my child or a child in my class, if it's children's ministries, has a mental health disorder or if there's a problem? So some of the current mental health problems that we're seeing in children currently is anxiety disorders. And under that umbrella, we have generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. We have separation anxiety, which I know a lot of moms will know about, you know, when you've had your baby and now you've got to separate from this cute little bundle and you've got to go back to work, and baby's got to go to creche or a family member. And so that is separation anxiety. Panic disorder and social anxiety. We are seeing a really high increase in social anxiety amongst children. Then we see post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD. We see behavior problems are also starting to increase. And under behavior problems, we have conduct disorder, we have ODD, we have ADHD, like previously mentioned, and we also have OCD. And now I know a lot of parents will know what this is, because a lot of parents have this exact thing as well, right? Things must be in the right place, they must look the right way, it must be perfect. And so that could be a bit of a obsessive compulsive disorder. And we see that our kids are battling with this need to be perfect. Then we have depression. We've also seen a spike in depression with children and teens. We've seen autism spectrum disorders, especially that are diagnosed later. So when a child shifts from primary to high school, we see a lot of autism disorders then being diagnosed, eating disorders, bipolar disorders, body dysmorphic disorder, and gender dysphoria. So we see with these two here at the bottom, they have also increased over the last 3-4 years, especially this body dysmorphic disorder and gender dysphoria. So I'm just going to give a little bit about the gender dysphoria. That is where we typically see children that are battling with their gender identity. They are confused about their gender identity, and we are seeing this a lot more in children and teens. Okay, so you could say, okay, Danny, what are the factors adding additional stress to children's mental health, right? Because there are other factors also adding to the stress that our children are experiencing and the quality of their mental health. So one of the things that we see is poverty. You know, with COVID-19 and the world just being turned upside down and things just going haywire, a lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of families were thrown into poverty. A lot of families didn't have good quality nutritional food. They were just scraping by. So we've seen that this has a strong link in young people's poor mental health. Similarly, previous data sets before More than 1 in 4, which is 29%, 7 to 16-year-olds with a mental health difficulty lived in a household which experienced a reduction in income in the past year. And if I had to ask anybody in the group here this evening, how many of you have gone to the shops and noticed that buying unhealthy food is cheaper than buying healthy food? You can just show by your hands. So the problem with that is that we are creating a society that is saying, well, I don't have the finances or the money to buy healthy food. So just in order to have any kind of food, I'm going to buy unhealthy food. And so we have this perpetuating society that is adding additional stress to children's. It's just causing them to make poor choices when it comes to food and nutrition. Then this is one of my favorite topics to discuss with my teens and young children that I speak to, and that is social media. I always say to them, how is social media affecting you? Does it affect you? I know it does, but I'm asking them questions. And they'll say to me, no, Titani, it's so much fun. And then as we get into things, eventually I'll start to hear, oh yeah, I have a bit of FOMO, and it stresses me out when I can't get to my phone and I hear it's beeping and I just want to know what's going on. And I'm expected to keep up with this and keep up with that. And so eventually we see that it starts to cause anxiety and it starts to cause them a lot of stress. And so a 2022 survey was the first in the series to ask whether young people have been bullied online and whether they feel safe using social media. The data revealed that 1 in 8 11 to 16-year-olds social media users reported that they have been bullied online. However, this figure is more than 1 in 4, which is about 29.4% among those with a mental health difficulty. So those children that suffered with a mental health difficulty found that they were being targeted more, that they were bullied more, and made examples of in their peer sets, in their friend groups. Then negative experiences of social media underline its potential role as a risk factor to mental health. Social media to young children and teenagers can be extremely destructive. If it's not managed effectively by adults, by parents, by guardians, it can turn into a very destructive force in that child's life. At the same time, though, social media being destructive, we also find that it can also be productive if managed, like I said before, where children are able to find, or teens are able to find, services that they can speak to somebody about their mental health, and they find support. Okay, so let's talk about the homes a little bit. So this is something that I see on a daily basis. Homes where there is violence and abuse, whether mentally or physically, are extremely problematic to children's mental health development. So you might say, Danny, okay, why? And that is because children in their very formative years, in their foundation years, they are busy imprinting. They are learning from their parents how to deal with crisis, how to deal with issue, how to deal with conflict, how to deal with making better choices and decisions. If that imprinting is faulty, that child does not know that. To that child, that is the right way to do things. So we often see children that come in with anger issues. They don't know how to express themselves, but they've seen in their homes violence or anger, or they've seen someone express that and they get a reaction. So they think, okay, that's the way I deal with that. And so it's very important that homes where children are growing up and developing, that they are taught the proper skills and shown how to deal with issues and problems. Then at schools, so schools can be very conducive to a child's growth and development, and they can also be very destructive. In that, we find that children that have a mental health issue will not want to go to school. They will want to stay at home. They are being bullied. They do not want to interact with other children. They find it very difficult to socially connect with children their ages. So they would rather want to stay at home. We find that children would rather want to isolate than be interactive with teachers or other children their age. Okay, so if you ask me what are the signs of mental health problems, these are just some of the signs. Please don't self-diagnose your child and say, oh my goodness, my child. Rather go see a professional. So I'm putting out a warning there to say, if you think that your child might have a mental health problem or might be struggling, please contact the professional to help you with that. Okay, so some of the signs are that you notice that your child is withdrawing from or avoiding social interactions. So they self-isolate. So if your child, when they were younger or before, was very bubbly, outgoing, loved activities, loved being outside, and then all of a sudden you noticed they are withdrawn. They don't really want to talk. They don't want to be outside. They don't want to play with friends. They would rather be themselves. That is a sign that something is going on and that you need to investigate. Persistent sadness that lasts 2 weeks or more. So if you notice that your child is just continually sad, if you do things to try and lift their mood or try and make them smile and it's just not working, that is a sign that there's something going on as well. Hurting themselves or talking about hurting themselves. It's important to note here that if your child is hurting themselves or talking about hurting themselves or saying that somebody else in class is hurting themselves and they spoke about it, etc., that it is very important to get help immediately. Please do not ignore this one. This is a major red flag, and sometimes parents will feel guilty and not seek professional help. Sometimes parents will think, oh, I'm a bad parent. How can my child do this? I've not been around enough, and we beat ourselves up, etc., etc. Please get yourself and your child the help that they need if they are definitely talking about this. Do not ignore it and don't push it aside. Then if they're talking about death and suicide, another major red flag, also get your child help immediately. Do not push it aside or downplay it in any way. Get your child the help that they need. Further signs, if you notice that your child is declining in school performance, they have poor grades, despite them saying, Mommy, but I'm studying. I just can't wrap my head around it, or I just don't know what's going on. If you see that there is a change in them, that could indicate that there's a mental health problem. It could indicate that they are battling to process things. It could indicate that they are experiencing difficulties, whether emotionally or physically, and that they need help. If your child is constantly worrying or anxious, so, a little bit of worry and anxiety is not the end of the world. I tell parents, if your child, it's a healthy emotion because it's part of the fight or flight emotion. So if your child is anxious before a test or exam, that's a big thing. And that worry and anxiety is okay within margin. If your child is constantly worried, constantly anxious, constantly walking on eggshells, then that is something that you need to investigate and speak to them about and find out what is going on. If your child refuses to go to school and participate in normal daily activities, in other words, getting up, doesn't want to get up, getting dressed, it's a fight, it's a nightmare. They are fighting you all the way. Doesn't want to go to school, is screaming, shouting, or we've seen in cases where kids complain about headaches, they're not well, they got tummy aches, they just not interested, they don't want to shower, they don't want to do daily hygiene. Those are all signs that your child could be suffering with something and dealing with suffering or dealing with something and they need help. These are all signs that there could be a problem and you need to pay attention as a parent. You need to get involved. Then another sign is hyperactivity, fidgeting, finding it difficult to concentrate, and then also finding it difficult to complete simple tasks. This sign is normally when we will see children with ADHD who just are finding it very difficult to just sit down and concentrate at school or just complete easy tasks. They lose their train of thought, they're all over the place, this could be a sign. Okay, so now let's continue looking at the signs, and we'll look at out of control behavior that can be harmful. So kids that are extremely risky, all of a sudden, extremely doing dangerous things, like for instance, playing with knives, cutting themselves, smoking, drinking, just exhibiting really dangerous behavior, out of control behavior that has not been there before. Depression and sadness, like we said, that persists for 2 weeks and more. This one, they normally say, according to the DSM-5 classification, that this one, in order to be diagnosed with depression, has to be 2 weeks or more, because children go through emotional ups and downs, right? Today they had a fight at school with their best friend, and the best friend's not talking to them, and they're not talking to the best friend, and it's the end of the world. And tomorrow they wake up and they go to school and everybody's happy again. And so we see the fluctuation of mood, and that's a normal fluctuation. But when sadness and depression persists for 2 weeks or more, then we start asking questions. What's going on? What's happening? Are you feeling it difficult? Are you feeling it difficult to emotionally regulate? Has something happened that you need assistance with to process and to deal with? Then also persistent disobedience or aggression. We know that there are strong-willed children, and strong-willed children are species unto their own, some parents will say. But there's a difference between a strong-willed child and a persistently disobedient or aggressive child. A child that is persistently aggressive and angry and wants to hurt somebody, wants to hurt themselves. A child that will not listen at any cost. A child that will not engage with their parents to get to a point where they can agree on something. That is also a sign that there could be a problem, and that you need to look into it and further assess it. So then we also have outbursts or extreme irritability. If your child is displaying, tantrums, massive tantrums, if they're displaying extreme irritability all the time, or they're lashing out, there could be a sign that they are battling to regulate themselves, or they don't know how to regulate themselves, and they need help. I'd just like to say, before I move on to the next slide, we find that in a lot of children, their vocabulary is not an adult's vocabulary, right? Their vocabulary is not a teenager's vocabulary. So a lot of children battle, and some of the times also teenagers battle to vocalize their emotions. They battle to say that, or to name an emotion. So for example, one of the things I teach in my practice is that we have an emotions wheel, and I like to compare it to an ice cream sundae. So an ice cream sundae, you have the cherry on the top, right? And the cherry on the top signifies anger. But there's a whole lot of ice cream and chocolate sauce and nuts and all kinds of things holding up that ice cream sundae. And that cherry is just the end result of everything else. So when I speak to kids about emotions, I ask them, what are you feeling? And they'll tell me, I'm extremely angry. And I'll say to them, okay, explain to me what is the emotions that are feeding that anger. And they'll be lost. They don't know what I'm talking about. They'll be like, no, Auntie Danny, I only know about anger. What are you talking about? And so we work through the emotions wheel to show them that frustration feeds anger, annoyance feeds anger, irritability feeds anger, feeling lost feeds anger, feeling unsettled feeds anger. So when they see that, they're able to start vocalizing their emotions. They're able to start saying, oh, okay, so Auntie Danny, I'm not just angry. These are the emotions that's feeding that anger. And now I can unpack it and say, why am I feeling like that? What is this emotion triggering? And so it's important that our kids are taught emotional IQ, just as much as intelligence IQ, because they need to know how to vocalize or say how they're feeling and how to then get the help that they need. Okay, so what can parents do, right? Because I know a lot of parents come to me, a lot of parents ask me, Danny, what can we do? How do we help our child? How do we assist them? And this is some of the advice that I give to parents. I tell parents, talk to your children about emotions, whether good or bad ones. Talk to them, communicate to them, and help them understand the proper way to deal with emotions. That emotions come and go. They're not a constant. They fluctuate. Sometimes we have good days and sometimes we have bad days, but that's okay. It's part of life. It's how we deal with them. It's how we react to them. Then create safe spaces in your home where your child feels safe to speak and ask questions. So an example of this is I have 2 younger daughters. They are teenagers. And so their safe space to speak to me, much to my unhappiness because it's my de-stress place, but this safe space to speak to me is on my bed. So they will come and they'll sit down and they'll say, Mommy, I need to talk to you. And that is a word and a cue that I know, okay, I got to put my phone down. I got to not answer messages. I got to give them 100% because they've got something important on their mind. So create a phrase or something that you can use with your child to show you or to indicate to you that what your child has to say right now needs your full attention and not a divided attention. Kids will often complain to me and say, Auntie Dan, you know, my parents, they get home, they're busy, they this, that, the next thing, and then I'm in bath and homework, and then I didn't get a chance to speak to them. And I needed to tell them something very important. So it's important that we create these spaces in our homes for our kids to be able to speak to us and feel safe to speak to us. It's important to listen to hear, be an active listener, and not listen to respond. Do not be a reactive listener. There's a big, big difference. If a child is trying to tell you something and you're cutting in and you're cutting them off and you taking over the conversation, they will tend to shut down and withdraw because you are taking over. You are not listening to them. You are being a reactive listener to get the conversation done so that we can move on to the next thing. And that's not what they need. They need you to be an active listener. This is a really good one. If your child wants to talk to you, don't be on your phone, please, parents. There is nothing more destructive for any child, whether they are 5, 10, 15, 20. Okay, they're not children at that age, but there's nothing more destructive for children who feel that their parents cannot give them their full attention because they're distracted by a phone. Put the phone down. Give your child the full attention they're asking for. And if it's an emergency and you're on your phone and your child wants your attention, indicate to them that you're dealing with an emergency and that you will be with them in 10, 15 minutes, but then be with them in 10, 15 minutes. Don't push that out or say, oh, sorry, I forgot. Don't make them feel less important. They are just as important, if not more important, than what you're dealing with. Engage with them, show them empathy and genuine interest in what they're going through and what they're trying to tell you. Let them ask you questions. Children, as I'm sure all of you will know on this group, children love questions. They can, every day I get 1 million questions, and it's important for them to ask the questions. They need to figure it out in their minds. They need to understand what they're asking and where it works and how it fits and if it doesn't fit. You know, something that we learn in neuropsychology is that a child's brain is only fully developed in a girl by the time she's 23 and in a male by the time they're 25. So that front logical part, that planning, that questioning, all of that only develops much later in life. And that's why they need to ask you those questions. That's why they need your full attention, because they don't know and they don't understand and they find it very difficult to process. If you're not sure about something, research it. Go do your homework. I know we're busy parents. I know we've got 10,000 things on our plates. But if you don't understand something, go research it. Contact a professional. Be proactive. If your child is coming to you with a problem or a situation and they need to understand it, be proactive in research and find the answers that you need in order to be able to help your child and feel more empowered. Okay, be real with your kids. This is something that the kids often tell me. They often say to me, Auntie Danny, my parents are just, they don't want to discuss this topic, or they don't want to talk about that topic, or, we shy away from certain things. And be real with your kids. Remember that they're out there in the world. They're being exposed to things every day. So in order to eliminate confusion and a mind that is not sure, make sure that they can come to you for the correct information. Make sure that they can speak to you and get the right information, and not a friend at school, and not X, Y, and Z, but you, their parent. And then this is a good one, because it says, don't judge them, scold them, or make them feel guilty for opening up to you. I hear this a lot, quite a bit. Kids will say to me, oh no, Danny, I can't talk to my parents about this. They're going to judge me. Or, oh my goodness, like I can't have this discussion because it's going to be mad. Don't create that environment. If your kids want to speak to you, allow them to speak to you. There's nothing worse for a child than wanting to speak to a parent about something that is really bothering them, or something that they're really battling to process or emotionally regulate over, and they can't go to their parent because they're so afraid of what their parent's reaction will be. And the only thing that does is it compounds the problem. It makes it worse. They should be able to come to you to help them with those problems. Constantly reassure them that you love them and that they are safe and cared for. This is very important. Often kids will feel that if I say this, or if I tell my parent this happened at school today, or I'm thinking about this, or I'm really battling with depression, they feel that their parents will love them less. They feel that their parents will care less about them. And so it's important to reassure our children that that's not the case, that you will love them regardless, and that they have a safe space that they can come and speak to you. Okay, so if you think that your child needs help, I can't reiterate this enough. Contact a professional who can assist you and your child, and don't delay in getting help. I always say to parents, rather err on the side of caution than delay getting your child the help that they need. We don't want to go down this road. There are a lot of parents who have gone down a very different path. And so I urge parents, if your child is coming to you with something, they are battling with something, get them the professional help they need. Don't make the issue or problem about you. Focus on your child's needs and assisting them. Kids will often say to me, Auntie Danny, I can't tell my mother or my father this, because then they'll say, oh, I must be a bad parent and I must have done this. And it's not about you. It's about your child. Your child needs you to put yourself aside for a few minutes and assist them and help them in what they're dealing with. Remember, in closing, that they are a gift from God. They are precious beyond precious. And they, just like you when you were younger and you were a child, are doing the best that they can possibly do. They depend on your help and your guidance every day. Being a parent is not for sissies. It's not a joke. Having kids is not a joke. But it's also a blessing. And it's a godsend from up above. So be there, help them in life's mucky mire. The world out there is pulling our kids in 20 different directions. Be the help and the guidance and the safe space that they need. Okay, so those are just some references.